Metaverse and Web3 are often used as umbrella terms for the next generation of the internet, and the transformation they signify presents both a challenge and an opportunity for India. While some remain skeptical, we believe Metaverse and Web3 will lead the frontiers of the next wave of digital adoption for Indian industries. To learn more on this topic, Delhi-NCR, in a knowledge partnership with Arthur Delhi, is organizing an informative webinar for tech startups and other stakeholders operating in the Indian digital ecosystem. The webinar will include a detailed presentation on the Metaverse beyond fantasy and the rise of the new internet and India opportunity. Please allow me to formally introduce the two speakers from Arthur Delhi. Dr. Albert May. He has been an entrepreneur since his teenage years when he started selling magic shows. He is the founder of Presence, a startup he sold to the strategic consulting firm Arthur Little in 2020, and of which he is now associate director. Dr. Albert has been an academic director at HEC Paris and Mainz Telecom Institute. Trained as a telecom engineer, he holds a PhD in computational physics from the Australian National University and an MBA from HEC Paris Business School. In 2008, the French École Polytechnique awarded him its Innovation Prize. He is the author of many books and publications on innovation and digital transformation, over a dozen peer-reviewed academic articles, and 2 patents. He is an ultra-trail runner and a seasoned photographer. Thank you so much, Dr. Albert, for taking your time. We also have with us Barnik Chitran Maitra. He is the managing director of Arthur D. Little, India and South Asia. At Arthur D. Little, he is responsible for the company's regional footprint by serving leading institutions and ensuring a preeminent position for ADL in India and South Asia. He has over 2 decades of experience and has a proven track record of leadership ability and is also a technology expert, Silicon Valley investor, board advisor, publisher, author, and renowned speaker at key global fora. He is a member of ADL's global leadership team and the regional leadership team of Arthur D. Little Middle East. Having taken the helm of the oldest global management consulting firm in the region, Barnik has scaled ADL within 24 months, having made inroads in several verticals such as telecom, technology, automotive utilities, healthcare, agriculture, and water, with an additional focus on digital transformation, rural development, tourism, space, and industrial manufacturing. His expertise in helping leading Indian companies globalize their businesses and advising governments on job creation informs all his work. He's also passionate about working with startup companies and contributing to nation building in India. The session will begin with keynote address by Dr. Albert on the topic, the Metaverse Beyond Fantasy, followed by address by Barnik Maitra on the rise of new internet in India opportunity. Guys, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A box as Dr. Albert and Barnik, they go ahead with their presentation. And in between, whenever time permits, we would be taking up those questions and putting it live across to them. So without much ado, over to you, Dr. Albert.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be with you today. So the presentation I'm going to give is called The Metaverse Beyond Fantasy. And this is a short presentation of what we have actually described in a report that came out a few months ago. And we called this report The Metaverse Beyond Fantasy because at the time, many things had been said and written about the metaverse. And some of these things were sometimes a little bit true, but also very often not so correct. So we've made, with our team, a very detailed analysis of both the technical maturity and the business maturity of the metaverse. And so we came out with a 100-page report, and I'm going to share with you some of the insights of this report. Let's try to make this session interactive. As it was said in the introduction, don't hesitate to ask questions or make comments during the presentation. And first, I would like to share a personal anecdote with you. It was back during the first lockdown in France. It was in March 2020. And my wife and I were working from home, of course, and it was a Wednesday afternoon. So our kids, our twin daughters, were not at school. And at some point, I was fed up to see them on their screens. And so I told them, please just drop your your screens, your tablets, and do something else. And then they told me, but Dad, we are not on our screens. We are actually playing hide and seek with our friends in Roblox. And I'm telling you this story because I thought, first of all, I first thought that she was making a joke, but actually she was not making a joke. She was really convinced that she was playing hide and seek with her friends, but because she was blocked at home, she was reproducing usages that she would have done outside in real life. But because she was stuck at home, she did these usages at home on the screen within a certain platform called Roblox. And this is a very good illustration of what is currently going on with the young generations who are spending a lot of their time having their social interaction, social life through digital platforms and through immersive platforms. And these teenagers are tomorrow going to be the consumers of the real world. So this is a very important signal that we definitely should take into account when it comes to business and strategy. And this is what I'm going to speak about. So as you know, or as you may or may not know, actually, the metaverse is something which is not new. It's a concept that was invented by science fiction authors and a relatively long time ago. The first book that we can find is from 1980. And already at this point, science fiction authors had already invented virtual worlds in which people and organizations can connect and have all sorts of interaction. And there are many other books, many other films, and I'm sure that you've seen some of them. So it's an old concept, at least 40 years old. And it's also an old concept in real life because since the mid-90s, startups and companies have tried to develop virtual worlds in which, once again, people and organizations can interact and have an alternative life. And what is true also is that there has been a very, very strong acceleration since, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. It came originally from the world of gaming, but it spread over other industries, such as social media and such as companies developing, for example, software to enable remote collaboration or remote working. So it's been around for a long time, 40 years in science fiction, 20 years in real life, and there has been this very strong acceleration. So the question that we may ask ourselves are the following. There are 3 questions that we address in the report and 3 questions that I'm going to try to address with you all today. First question is, as I said, it's quite old and there has been an acceleration. So what are the 3 ingredients that are together today for the first time that make it possible today, that makes the metaverse possible today? First question. Second question, is it really a revolution or is it some kind of buzz or some kind of hype that is going to deflate with Facebook's misfortune? And I anticipate a little bit on the answer to this question because we are deeply convinced at ADL that this is a revolution. And so given this revolution and given the level of uncertainty that is around this revolution, how should we as companies, how should we go with it? And this is the third question that I'm going to touch today. So let's dive into it. First thing I would like to do is to share the definition that we have adopted at ADL for the metaverse. Because if you look at the definition or the visions which are proposed by the leading players internationally, you can see that there are common points, but there are also differences, convergence and divergence. So it's important to agree on the words so we can make our analysis. So the metaverse, first of all, is the future version of the internet. This is super important because we tend to believe that the metaverse is virtual reality, or that it's augmented reality, or that it's gaming, or that it's a specific platform, while in reality, after having interviewed hundreds of experts across the world, one of the common points is that it's really the next iteration of the internet. In the same way that 15 years ago, we moved from a desktop fixed usage to a mobile usage, we are about to move, and we have started to move to another kind of set of usages, which are not only mobile, but more and more immersive. And this is the second point of the definition. It's a future version of the internet, which is increasingly blending the frontiers between reality and virtuality. What it means here is that once again, we tend to think of the metaverse as being something around virtual reality, where the real world is completely blocked out. While in reality, what we discovered is that the main usages that are likely to emerge in the coming months, years, are more of the nature of augmented reality. So with, for example, glasses such as the ones I'm currently wearing on my nose, where we are going to superimpose layers of data, information, and representations. And this is really the usages that are going to explode in the coming years. So future version of the internet and augmented reality are really the key aspects of this definition. Okay, so let's jump now to the ingredients that enable the metaverse today and not 20 years ago or 40 years ago. The first ingredient is really the explosion of users, of people, of organization, leveraging, consuming synthetic worlds. The example that is here, you may have heard of it. It's a concert that was given by a singer called Travis Scott within Fortnite. Fortnite is a video game developed by Epic Games. And this concert, when it was proposed, was also streamed in a synthetic world in front of 12 million people. So 12 million people around the world were watching this concert live in an immersed manner. And this was the first example, but now many artists today also propose their concerts in synthetic worlds, and it can engage several dozens of millions of people at the same time. And this is really a new kind of experience. This is an example in the field of music, but we can see this increase, this very strong increase of users, of people consuming synthetic worlds in all industries and across all generations. So this is the first ingredient, explosion of the number of users, and it's quite recent. The second ingredient is related to the fact that we have reached a sufficient level of maturity when it comes to the software. And in particular, over the last few years, we've seen emerging what I call infrastructure platforms. Let me explain a little bit. I guess you can't see my iPhone. I'm showing an iPhone at the moment. And you know that a lot of the value of the iPhone is, of course, in the device. But actually, most of the value is not in the device itself. It's in the apps that you can install on the iPhone to really customize your experience. And when Apple launched the iPhone 15 years ago, they could have decided to hire an army of developers to develop all these applications. But it's not what they did. Instead, they have offered the possibility to external developers to develop applications based on an infrastructure that was proposed by Apple. Okay, this is the App Store. On one side of the App Store, you have people buying apps, so people like us. And on the other side of the App Store, you have developers developing these applications. And Roblox, for example, many people tend to think of Roblox as a video game for teenagers, while in reality, it's a lot more than a video game. It's an infrastructure platform. And on one side of the platform, you have teenagers having all sorts of virtual experiences with their friends, gaming or socializing. And on the other side of the platform, you have developers building digital experience, immersive experiences for teenagers. So these platforms are really super important because they create an ecosystem of consumers and creators. So, and based on this ecosystem, you have a real economy that appears. And over the last few years, this is the second ingredient, several of these major platforms have appeared and are creating this ecosystem and this digital economy. This is the second ingredient. The third ingredient is related to hardware. And when I speak about hardware, I speak about the whole digital stack. So it goes from the devices that you use to interact and immerse yourself in the synthetic world, all the way down to the technical infrastructure, computers, computing power, bandwidth, network, etc., etc. And there again, we have reached a very important level of maturity enabling the metaverse. And by the way, next week, Apple is going to announce their virtual reality headsets. And I think this is super important to keep that in mind, because remember that each time Apple entered a certain industry, music 20 years ago, telephony 10, 15 years ago, it changed everything. So we can expect that stuff is really going to change when Apple announces their VR headsets next week. Okay, so just to recap, 3 ingredients: explosion of the number of users, maturity of software and in particular infrastructure platforms, and maturity of the hardware, man-machine interfaces, but also computing power and all these other things. So these are the 3 ingredients enabling the metaverse. We are not there yet. It will take probably another 10 years to really get to one single metaverse, fully immersive, etc., because there are still technological bottlenecks. But this is definitely an ongoing revolution. I mean, these trends exist. They've been around for decades, and they are not going to stop, irrespective of what's happening with Facebook, for example. So now let me share with you some of what is going to change for companies. So we've developed, as we are good consultants, strategy consultants, we've developed a nice framework to make an analysis of both the technology maturity, but also the business maturity. I'm not going to go in all the details of this framework, but let me tell you that this framework allowed us to be very exhaustive in our analysis. And we have estimated that the market for the metaverse, and I'm just speaking about the value that is going to be created thanks to the metaverse on top of the digital economy. So I'm really speaking about new additional value on top of the digital economy. And we have estimated that the market is of the order of 500 billion by 2030, with a 30 to 40% annual growth, which makes it a very dynamic market. And we have identified over 40 types of metaverses use cases across all industries and also across all types of metaverse. And what I mean by type of metaverse are the 3 following things. First, consumer metaverse. Consumer metaverse is what most people know. It's everything for individuals. So it's gaming, entertainment, social interaction, etc., etc. Then enterprise metaverse is kind of the future of what we are currently doing together. It's a future of training, future of education, future of meetings, future of collaboration in a more immersive manner. And by the way, this is probably the metaverse that is progressing the fastest at the moment. And then 3, industrial metaverse. Industrial metaverse is also in a professional context. It's also about collaboration, but this time it's a collaboration which is done around the digital twin of something. Something can be a factory, can be a company, can be a plane engine, etc., etc. So it's kind of the next step of what we have called Industry 4.0 and industrial digital twins for the last decade. And as I was saying, we found many use cases or types of use cases across these 3 segments and across all industries. And I'm just going to share some of them with you and try to show you what most companies among our clients are currently working on across the world. The first use case is everything related to remote collaboration, remote working. There are several tools enabling that. A very good tool, actually, whether we like or don't like Facebook, is actually Workrooms, which is developing by Facebook Meta, which is really a great tool. And this enables to have virtual rooms where you can meet your colleagues and interact with your colleagues and work together on shared documents in a very, very natural manner. And this is probably the first use case that is currently tried by many companies as we speak, because it's relatively easy to deploy. There is no risk to do silly things that would be visible from our customers or from our external partners. So it's really a good way to test and learn and develop experience, develop knowledge, develop expertise around this particular use case. A second use case is everything related to training and remote training. The example that is here is with an American startup called Striver, and here it's implemented at Walmart. And this is also very interesting because we found training applications in all sectors and even the most surprising. So it ranges from customer service to sport, health and safety, etc., etc. And once again, it's a use case that is relatively easy to implement internally and to test without taking the risk to, once again, damage our brand because we have done something silly which is visible from the outside. So it's really a nice way to engage our collaborators into learning, testing, etc. Third example that is also used a lot by companies today is everything related to events, and in particular, internal events. Once again, the platform here, I picked this one, and there are many, many others, but I personally like a lot Spatial because it's multi-device. So it means that you can organize an event in a synthetic world, in the metaverse, and people can join this event with their smartphone, with their computer, with their VR headset, if they have a VR headset, etc. So once again, these first 3 examples are really easy to implement and to test and learn and develop expertise, develop know-how, develop a culture internally. Then there are a few other examples which I personally find intriguing, but that are maybe not as mainstream yet. And the example that is here is a partnership between Roblox. So Roblox is this platform that I was mentioning before, which is mostly for teenagers and pre-teenagers. And it's a partnership between Roblox and Gucci, a luxury brand. And basically what they did here was to organize a fashion show inside the synthetic world, and they sold virtual goods, virtual bags, luxury bags inside this synthetic world. So we can see that many brands have started to enter the metaverse to start selling virtual goods, but also to develop specific relation, in particular with the young generations, because tomorrow's the metaverse, as being the future version of the internet, is going to be one of the channels to communicate, to sell to our customers, but also to sell not only real goods, but also virtual goods. So this example may sound a little bit superficial. And after, I have 3 examples which are really, really serious, where we see that the metaverse can bring really benefits to us as human beings. And I've taken 3 examples in the sector of healthcare. And these 3 examples, I've picked one in the consumer metaverse, another one in the enterprise metaverse, and another one in the industrial metaverse. So the first one is really for individuals. It's digital twins of patients have been developed by in Germany of patients to unlock or to enable or to facilitate so-called precision medicine. Precision medicine is how do you really customize a therapy, a cure for someone in particular, given his or her personal specificities, but also given his or her environment or way of life, etc., a way of living. So this is the first example. It's still at a prototype stage, but these are the kind of things which are being developed as we speak. Another example is here, we go back to training. So it's an enterprise metaverse use case in the healthcare industry. And in this case, it's a startup that is called Fundamental VR that is leveraging virtual reality technology as well as haptic technologies, which are the fact of providing feedback through specific gloves or tools, etc. And here it is used to allow surgeons or medical staff to train on specific things, such as specific surgeries. So you train virtually in a synthetic world before training actually on the real patients. Last example, still in healthcare, and this time it's the industrial metaverse. And the example here is a pretty big and well-known French company called Dassault Systems. And Dassault Systems is developing digital twins of many different things. And in particular, they have developed a very realistic digital twin of a human heart. And not only people can train on this virtual heart, but it's also possible to develop certain therapies and test these therapies digitally before actually testing these therapies on real people. So here it's an example of what we can do today. And this is really not science fiction. It's something that is existing, that is generating revenues, bringing a lot of value related to the industrial metaverse. So I started to speak about the ingredients which are together to enable the metaverse today. I presented some of the current use cases, and now I'm going to conclude on this very short last part to show that despite the fact that we have certain trends which are currently ongoing, which are certain, it's certain that the technology is going to get more and more mature. It's certain that we are going to get a certain level of maturity for all these technologies, and it's certain that the metaverse is going to emerge in the coming years. Next to this certainty, to these certain trends, there are also specific factors which are potentially both very impactful and also relatively uncertain. And I'm going to share with you some of these factors which are both potentially impactful and also very uncertain. If you take interoperability, for example, which is the one on the top right corner, interoperability is the fact, is the following thing. If you remember, in the late 90s, at the beginning of the web, if you were connecting to the internet with a specific service internet provider, and if your friend or if your colleague was connecting with another service internet provider, it was not guaranteed that you could interact with the person. It was not guaranteed that you could share resources. And I personally remember very well, I was, when I was a teenager at my place, at my parents' place, we had American Online, AOL, and I had a friend who was connecting with CompuServe, another internet service provider, and it was not possible to communicate. So this is exactly in the state we are today with the metaverse. We don't have one single metaverse. We have several proto-metaverses which are not connected, which are not interoperable. And there is a huge uncertainty here. We don't know yet whether we will have several metaverses or one single metaverse. So depending on what happens, it will have a huge impact on business and the way we strategize with it. But because there is this uncertainty, we have to deal in a specific way. And one good way to deal with this critical uncertainty is to build future scenarios and to get ready for any scenario that may appear in the future. And this is typically the kind of exercises that we do with our clients when we engage on strategy, innovation strategy, or corporate strategy related to the metaverse. So as a conclusion, these are some of the steps that we recommend to engage when it comes to metaverse, and also given the level of uncertainty that I have mentioned before. So first of all, we believe it's extremely important to acculturate our colleagues internally, both at the top management level and also on the field, because most use cases are going to emerge from the field. But it's also important that the top management understand what is currently going on, what are the trends, how it may impact business, etc. Second thing is, how do you start actually doing things, testing things? It's like with the digital transformation at large, there is no magic recipe to get to success because there is a lot of uncertainty. So it means that us as companies, we need to proceed in a test and learn manner. So we need to really test use cases, see if it works, learn from the experience, etc. And this brings us to the third point. This test and learn approach also enables to build capabilities internally, to build knowledge, know-how, partners, etc., etc. And once we have done these three steps, then or in parallel, we can start building the strategic vision, the, let's say, mid to long-term strategic vision related to the metaverse. And this is what I had to share with you in a nutshell related to the metaverse. Happy to take a few questions if we have some.
I think Albert will probably take the questions towards the end, right? I think, Nitin, we've planned for 10 minutes at the end. Yeah?
Sure.
So if you guys can hear me, I think we can forward with the second presentation. Sachit, you want to share that? So we'll talk a little bit about what's happening in India, because I think Albert has given us a good global view based on research he's done. We've also recently in India done some local research on what's happening in the Metaverse and Web 3.0 spaces. So I'm going to cover three simple topics today. Talk a little bit about the use cases we see emerging in India. Talk a little bit about, which I think is the most interesting topic to several of you, is where is investor money flowing in? And there's been a dramatic change in that over the last 6 to 12 months. And then finally talk a little bit about what we all need to do together to nurture this ecosystem as we look in India. So if you move to the next slide, see again, we've looked at a lot of technologies. And again, here in India, both Web 3.2 and Metaverse are often used together and sometimes wrongly interchangeably. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's different. But when we did this research for Indian companies, we looked at several technologies and characteristics where we wanted to look at what startups are doing, but more importantly also what corporates are doing. We looked at immersive spaces, we looked at collaboration platforms, we looked at social experiences, we looked at DAO, tokenization, NFT, decentralization, DeFi, and then also quite interestingly, the creator economy and the central bank digital platform. So these are some of the research areas we looked at. If you go to the next slide, again, it's a framework slide. Let me try to explain to you what the framework is, and then I'll talk to you about some of the findings. I think we've very simply organized some of the emerging use cases in India across two simple axes. I think one is the decentralization axis, where Web 2.0, the classic Google, Facebook, Netflix, Microsoft are on the low end of decentralization to high decentralization, which is what true Web 3.0 is. And then there's something which is the sense of immersion, where again, Web 2.0 technologies are low sense of immersion. Again, what we're talking on today via Zoom is a Web 2.0 technology, which doesn't have a very high sense of immersion to a very high sense of immersion where the metaverse enters. And then across these two axes, obviously, there are a lot of overlaps. Now, if you looked at the use cases in India, we've broadly seen roughly 5 areas where we are seeing some action, right? And I'll go from left to right in the way. On the top left of the chart, where you see high sense of immersivity, but still a low level of decentralization, the consumer and enterprise metaverse. And again, we are seeing reasonably interesting use cases. Flipkart running a virtual marketplace, BMW doing virtual events, Myntra's now put on a virtual try-on feature. Maruti Suzuki launched a virtual showroom. Several companies, notably Apollo, is running VR-based trainings. You have banking clients, several of whom are doing virtual lounges. So again, there is a beginning of large companies in India and maybe some startups or scale startups who are beginning to use the immersive feature of these new technologies to create new consumer experiences. And again, we are seeing all kinds of companies jumping into this. Missing on this chart, by the way, if you look at even in the housing space, like Raheja announced that they are getting into a trial for their metaverse. Hiranandani announced their own metaverse for trial of housing products and retail products. So several players have announced intent. Some of them have now coming to life as we speak. In the industrial metaverse, which is another type of proto metaverses, which Albert talked about, which again, we are very simply calling Industry 5.0, we are seeing reasonable use cases on asset monitoring, with Vedanta doing some pilots. Walmart in India is doing supply chain management pilots on industrial metaverse, and then Siemens is doing capital allocation on industrial metaverse. So again, good early use cases. We all know about NFT and tokenization here. We find 2 interesting trends. You have companies like Hangama and doing what is called content monetization via tokens, and you have asset monetization, which is done by companies like Securitize and also bigger companies in the space like Polymath. There are also some DeFi startups. This is conditional financing, which is being done by Hedera and Curve. Again, you see several such startups. We profile only 2. And then there are obviously decentralized autonomous organizations where I think the notable UAE company, Dubai company, Decentraland, has made an foray into India. So again, asset-based donations, decentralized investing, metaverse governance. So again, I would say there is decent action and emergence of use cases across the entire ecosystem. We are seeing both use cases on metaverse-like ecosystem, which is on immersive experiences, but also on decentralized experiences. Now, if you move forward, I'll talk a little bit about the investor's perspective. If you move, the way investors have looked at this, and this is also similar to a little bit of what Albert presented, but I've just simplified this a little bit for us to understand. A lot of historic investments have gone into the experience continuum, mostly on gaming, social media, and sometimes even education and NFT investments. There has been a lot of investments in enablers. There are unicorns like Polygon, which have attracted significant investments. The third part, which is infrastructure, is dominated mostly by large companies. So that is not an area where startups play. So again, while incumbents own the full stack in most cases, I think Web 3.0 creates a space for disruption, not only in the experience continuum, but also in other layers like software and platform. Startups have mostly been built in the experience continuum, where there have been several areas like gaming, social media, and decentralized finance, where startups have been built. But increasingly, we are also seeing India playing a very important role in building the plumbing, as I call it, the plumbing for the new internet, right, which is building the interfaces, the tools, the blockchain platforms, the DAO providers, where you see several startups who've emerged and who also got reasonably funded. If you move to the next slide, there has been a change in the funding environment. I think the best funding was in FY22, where nearly $1 billion of capital flowed into the space. Since 6 months back, and this is mostly to do with the meltdown in the crypto market and the fall of FTX. There has also been an increase in cost of capital. The funding winter has hit the space quite hard. I think for me, this is a little bit of a postponement of a few quarters when investment sentiment will still return. But again, the funding environment has dramatically changed. Even if you look at the peak of funding, which was FY 22-23, 80% of the investments were on blockchain-focused companies, which are again a lot of enabler companies. 10% was on NFT and only 10% on crypto and metaverse. Right now, if you talk to investors, investors are only investing in Web 3.2 enablers. They're investing in all the plumbing for the new internet. I think there's still a lot of skepticism in investors to invest in the experience continuum because the risks there are higher. And given the entire sentiment around the world on slowdown, recession in Europe, slowdown in Europe, even in India next year, even though we are quite excited that India will grow at 6%, it's nowhere close to 8-9%, which is the potential of the economy. So in general, investors are taking a very cautious outlook to investments in the space. Investments, if any, will happen mostly in the enablers. So today, if you're a startup founder looking to play in the Web 3.2 arena and you're looking for ideas and you're looking for investments, I would say it's easier to get an investment if you're playing as an enabler and enabling the entire plumbing and the entire infrastructure for Web 3.2. I think people who are building end user apps, both for industrial and consumer metaverses and Web 3.2 technologies, will just find it harder to raise capital in this environment, which should in a few quarters look dramatically different. If you move to the next slide, again, so what should you do? I think one of the most important things is to look at use cases which work for consumers. So product market fit continues to be important. And again, as I said, there are very clear use cases in gaming, social media, commerce, and also finance or DeFi. E-commerce is a big market where you will see a lot of metaverse and Web 3.0 applications which are emerging. They'll all be powered by AI. There's a huge growth potential which e-commerce marketplaces are saying, not only in India, but also in Bharat, which creates a very unique opportunity for you to build enablers, but also integrate them with platforms with e-commerce. This is an opportunity which we can capture right now. Again, if you're looking to build enabler services, building in India for the world, given the SaaS success we've had, is also another imperative. Taking inspiration from our SaaS counterparts, I think, can build products and enablers for global internet providers. And then finally, as you're seeing the entire consumer enterprise metaverse, which are the early use cases, I think there is a lot of value in working with enterprises in the industrial space, either on digital twins or on supply chain solutions, and in the consumer space on sectors like fashion and retail for consumer trials and all of that, for you to build tools, both customer-facing apps, but also technology platforms to enable some of these enterprises. So again, if you want to de-risk your business and not build a consumer app, I think partnering with big corporates and building tools for them is the best. Again, we have a saying that the best customer to fund your business is actually the customer and not an equity provider. So there are several large corporates who are going to build metaverses and build experience continuums. I think partnering with them to provide services and tools will be a very, very profitable imperative for startups as they go into the future. So again, as we step back, what should we do? If you go to the next slide, what should regulators do? And this is quite important because as in most industries, you need some support. I think in India, we need some proactive, supportive regulation. Right now, there is a very strong clampdown on crypto for the right reasons. That has actually stifled sentiment in both Metaverse and Web 3.0 startups. I think the government should come up with a Web 3.0 policy which has regulations and standards and also creates a mechanism and a clear signal to investors that despite crypto and whatever the challenges with crypto exchanges may have been, the government wants to encourage creation of the new internet in India. India, with its huge base of software talent and engineering talent, should be the place where we build the new internet out of. And the government should ensure that there's a favorable policy and regulatory environment which supports startups for building Web 3.2 and Metaverse startups. Infrastructure is going to be a big constraint. So incentivizing infrastructure investments, particularly in terms of storage, compute, ensuring that there's more capacity built in country to support this is important. And then finally, if you look at hardware, a lot of use cases which Albert spoke about get enabled by hardware. The government can take a stance, particularly for education and healthcare, to provide some incentives or subsidies or even tax breaks to drive adoption for medical devices or education devices, which are more immersive reality devices, which are augmented reality, and government can actually facilitate faster adoption by driving a lot of subsidies and a lot of, I would say, incentives to do it. So again, it's an opportunity for India to capture. We believe that the Metaverse and the Web 3.0 opportunity in the next 10, 15 years can easily be a $200, $300 billion opportunity for India. It is now for India to actually play a very proactive role in shaping regulation, but also most importantly, if you remember Albert's ingredients, one of the most important ingredients to have scale adoption is actually users. And you can only have users if there is service providers, both on a technology, but also from a software point of view. So if immersive reality needs to be supported and augmented reality needs to be supported, there needs to be a policy to support devices. In the healthcare space, there is a new medtech policy which is coming out. I think all of you who are in the space should lobby very aggressively with NITI and other stakeholders to ensure that the medtech policy incorporates immersive devices and augmented reality devices when it comes to medtech and healthcare. For education, again, there's an option or opportunity to use far more immersive learning techniques using Web 3.2 and Metaverse technologies. And this is, again, solves the problem of access for India, and several startups can be built on this way. Again, the government needs to step in and see how devices can be subsidized or incentivized through tax breaks. And again, as with any other industry, this cannot happen without some proactive regulatory support. So again, for us right now, since it's the beginning of the journey, I think we need to ensure that the government also comes on the same page of supporting the industry. So summary and snapshot, it's an interesting opportunity for India. It can be a large opportunity for India. The full ecosystem of investors, startups, and government needs to work together to ensure that we capture the full potential of this opportunity. With this, I think we can pause the presentation and take some few questions. Albert is also available, so please direct any technical questions on the Metaverse and use cases to him. And I don't know if Sanchit, you have some questions we can read out for us, which we can start answering.
Yes. Yes. So we have a question. We have a question on how people want to understand about monetization model for companies in the metaverse. Albert, if you could take up this question.
I'm sorry, the sound is a little bit of echo. I did not understand the question.
I think, Albert, the question was on monetization models. What monetization models are you seeing for the metaverse? Yeah.
Well, there are many different models, actually. So there is no one single model. It's a little bit like in the digital economy. So you have many different models. I don't know if I should pick some examples or.
So I need to pick a couple of examples, right? And then we can also chip in.
Okay, so one example is when it comes to selling digital goods. For example, I was speaking about Roblox earlier. Roblox is a company that generated $2 billion in revenues last year, and their business model mostly rely on selling virtual assets. So it can be a skin to customize the avatar. It can be accessing to certain types of experience, etc. And so the business model works in the following way. You have the creators who are developing these new experiences, these new tools, these skins, etc. And then on the other side, you have teenagers who buy these assets, virtual assets, for a few a few dollars. Actually, they use the money is called the Robux. It's a digital currency, but then this money is also convertible into proper real money. So that's one example. But what seems to really take off at the moment is what I was describing during my presentation, namely the fact that you have this this real economy, which is built on top of an ecosystem of creators and users.
So I think, Albert, there's a question on the Gucci bag, right? What is a virtual bag? And I think you should answer how much the virtual bag sold for. The entire Gucci fashion show you were mentioning, people bought virtual bags and how much they pay for it. And again, people ask me, what is a virtual bag?
What is a virtual bag is the question?
Yes.
Okay, so it's like, when you go in a platform and you want to buy a certain filter to look better or younger or I don't know what, you can also buy stuff to customize your avatar. And in the case of Roblox, you could buy a virtual bag. So it's not something that you have in real life. It's really something that you only have in a synthetic world to customize your look. And, since a big part of our personality, lives, interactions are getting digitalized in the same way that we want to look cool or look elegant or look fashionable in the real world, younger generation also want to look cool, elegant, and fashionable in the digital world. So you have this economy that starts to appear, which sounds, at least for people from my generation, sounds a little bit strange, but this is what is currently going on with young generations, and they are going to be the main consumers in a few years. So I think it's important whether we like it or not.
Yeah. So Albert, I'm going to take two questions to give you a break. I think I'm taking the two questions. One is about in the beauty industry, how can Meta help? And then there's a question on education. I think the beauty industry, I think the entire use case is around virtual try-ons and virtual products. So as you imagine, already Myntra is doing a marketplace where you can look at the clothes and try it on a virtual avatar of yourself to see how it looks. Similarly, you can extend that to beauty products, which can be done. So one of the earliest use cases is actually in the fashion industry, where virtual trials, virtual walkthroughs, applying products on virtual avatars have use cases. So the use case has been quite abandoned in India, and I'm sure around the world also. Every single fashion house is investing in Metaverse to ensure they use that as a point of trial. In education, again, as with immersive experiences, Metaverse is an interesting experience. There were some startups which also set up in Metaverse. One of them, a couple of them collapsed. I remember Metaversity. There was a fallout between founders. Again, one of the big, I would say, rate limiting factors for education usage is the usage of augmented reality headsets. I think until we have a cheaper and more reliable headsets, which I think next week we'll have an answer, at least on the Apple. I think that's far more user friendly. But again, unless there is a market for it, it's hard to adopt. But again, it's one of the use cases where immersive technologies can be used, particularly for remote learning. And one of the use cases, again, which is happening on several platforms which offer immersive experiences, education can be one of the earliest use cases. So these are a couple of answers I have. I think, Albert, I have more to pose two questions to you. One is a question on what's the intersection between AI and the Metaverse. And the second question linked to that is, if Metaverse, how related, what is the interdependency between NFTs and Metaverse? Right? Are they interlinked or are they not? So again, two related questions which you can take.
Yeah, so great questions. First question on AI and Metaverse. There are, I don't know if you remember, but during my presentation, I had this framework with the various layers of the Metaverse. And on the right side, there was one box called enabling technologies. And so enabling technologies are technologies which are used in all the layers of the Metaverse. And AI is one of the three key technologies we've identified because it plays a very important role everywhere. It plays a role in the infrastructure, to manage bandwidth and all these things. It plays a role, of course, in the man-machine interfaces. For example, for anything which is related to eye tracking, etc., detecting the position of your body in real life, you have AI. So it's really present everywhere. It's also very much used, and especially with generative AI that you have heard of over the last 6 months. Generative AI is used a lot to generate synthetic worlds, to generate avatars in a dynamic manner, and it will be used increasingly as a time pass. So that's to the answer to question 1, and question 2 was Metaverse and NFT. So that's a tricky question actually, because part of the community would like the Metaverse to be NFT enabled and to be blockchain enabled. And the reason for that is that if we accept the idea that the Metaverse is like another world where we have another life or a separated life, if we buy assets in this digital world, we want these assets to be permanent. We don't want this asset to suddenly disappear if the company, for example, that sold us this asset disappears. And one way to enable this permanence or resilience or persistence of these assets is to use blockchain and NFTs. So that's really why NFT could be a very important part of Metaverse. The thing is, the reality today is that most of the platforms are not blockchain or NFT enabled. If you take Roblox, that I mentioned several times, the $2 billion US in revenues, there is 0 NFT in that. So it does not mean that it won't happen in the future. But at this point, it's not clear yet if this is going to be the case.
Okay, I'm going to quickly answer a couple of questions. I know, Nitin, we're running out of time. There are lots of questions on use cases on HR, use cases on consultancy for diets, use cases for tourism. I think the answer is yes, you can actually create your own metaverses to attract customers. I think there are players who offer solutions. For example, in human resources, training, right? I spoke about training, any kind of people development, interviewing, a lot of use cases which are currently doing on Web 2.0 technologies and easily be moved into Metaverse. Any immersive applications, again, if you want to create trials, if you want to, again, this, by the way, I don't know how a small travel operator can do it, but today, if you're owning a fancy resort property, you can actually create an immersive experience to view that property, right? Which, again, is not really a metaverse, but a pre-metaverse kind of an application. So I think there are several applications of this which I think needs to be enabled. I think the benefit and the ROI has to be calculated by you in terms of how many additional customers can you get? Can you actually get more premium on your product because you have it on the metaverse? All of these questions need to be answered. But anything which happens today, which is interactive and immersive in a Web 2.0 world, can easily be enabled on a metaverse in a Web 3.0 world. Again, I think the economics of that needs to be factored in. I know, Albert, if you must be reading through the questions. Anything else you want to answer? I think you probably answered most of the pressing ones.
I think there was one on the how the legal industry and any use case around this domain.
No, so again, legal industry, you're again seeing, again, it's an intersection of you can use generative AI, you can use, and again, it's an industry where it's pretty similar to a face-to-face industry, which has now got disrupted into a virtual industry. So again, you can have client consultations. Again, you can see a lot of places where courts have also moved to online consultations. You can all be facilitated. I think in a metaverse where you have a single source of truth like blockchain, you can also start augmenting documents on it and use legal documents which have NFTs attached to it. So again, the use cases are there. Again, the challenge with the legal industry is that it's heavily regulated, and it's taken them a long while to get from simple in-person hearings to even online hearings. So again, applications are there, but in the client counsel environment, I'm sure you can pilot more applications than in the judicial environment. So again, there are use cases there. I think there's a question on how do we collaborate with Metaverse Studios. I think right now we are doing more research and talking to players than doing active collaborations. We have done some collaborations with players in gaming and in fashion. So again, I think Pankaj and Sanchit on the call can be a point of contact if you have some questions and what we are doing. But again, Albert will testify that the work we are doing is mostly research oriented in some cases. In some cases, it's business building oriented. But again, for us also, the collaboration model is evolving as we speak, right? I don't think since the industry is evolving, our collaboration model is also evolving. Yeah. Did anyone explore real exhibition venues? Yes, there are already exhibition venue providers who provided online immersive experiences. This is quite an active space. During COVID, a lot of players offered it, right? So again, there is an option without immersive reality, which is without augmented reality. Obviously, there's a better experience with augmented reality. Nathan, anything else did we miss? I don't know, Albert, if you want to comment on any of these questions.
I can comment on the question that you just touched upon. It's related to virtual exhibitions and virtual tourisms, etc. There is indeed a lot going on at this point. And actually, a few months ago, I took my kids to an exhibition in Paris. It was the possibility to visit the pyramids of Cheops virtually. And, you know, over the last 20 years, I've used a lot of VR systems. And for this particular one, I was really amazed because not only it was very good from a photorealistic standpoint, but in addition, it's a totally different experience from actually getting there because you get something which is maybe close to what you would get in real life, but also you get something which is different. Let me give you an example. At some point, our virtual guide removed all the stones from the pyramids, so we could see where the different rooms we had been into were in space and how they connect with each other, etc. And so it really gives a very different perspective, and I think it's a very, very interesting complement to real tourism. It brings new things, new experiences. So.
Barney, so I think with that, we have come towards the end of our time for the webinar. Dr. Albert, thank you so much for taking your time to be there. We really look forward to your physical presence back here in India, in Delhi, for
thank you.
Not a virtual or not a meetup, but a physical session with you. We've gone through your profile. There are so many exciting sessions you have taken, and we would really want that to happen for our members over here too. Thank you, Barney, for arranging it all for us and bringing across this topic and more discussions around it. We look forward to more conversations around it. You've anyway shared across the report link. We will share it with everyone. And audience, thank you so much for being part of the session today. Please go ahead and share your queries, questions, and we would forward it to the team at R30 Little. Pankaj and Sanchit are over here. If we would ask them about the person you guys can be in touch with, and can write to the team R30 Little directly and get your responses. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.